Have you ever noticed how some individuals seem to effortlessly command the environment around them without uttering a word? They don't shout or beg, they simply withdraw, and suddenly everything shifts. The energy changes, people start questioning, chasing, and feeling. Now imagine if you adopted the same approach. What if you stopped reacting immediately to everything, choosing silence over automatic responses and retreat over explosion? What do you think would happen? That's where the true power lies. When you stop being constantly available emotionally, physically, or psychologically, the world around you enters a state of crisis. People are accustomed to controlling you through your reactions, impulses, and predictability. But the moment you choose to step back, the game changes. Those who thought they knew you realize they know absolutely nothing about you. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Think about this: when you become inaccessible, who truly gets desperate? Who gets irritated and tries to provoke a reaction from you? This reveals more about them than it does about you. It shows how much you've been manipulated without even realizing it. You keep giving yourself away to please others, maintain peace, or avoid losing people who deep down were never really with you. With every forced yes, every immediate response, and every emotional reaction, you surrender a piece of your energy. By the end of the day, what's left is tiredness, frustration, and an emptiness you can't quite explain. Why? Because you're too available to those who don't deserve even a minute of your silence. This isn't about turning your back on the world. It's about choosing yourself. It's about learning what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, authentic, and complete. This journey begins when you understand that silence can be stronger than 1,000 arguments, and that withdrawal, when rooted in awareness rather than escape, is an act of power. So I ask you now, how long will you continue to be controlled by others' emotions? How long will you react like a puppet every time someone pokes at your wounds? Perhaps it's time to cut those strings and embrace the mystery of becoming unavailable. Because when you stop being available, everything changes. You've been conditioned since childhood to equate your worth with your availability to others. But here's the truth: excessive availability isn't a virtue, it's a prison. As long as you believe you need to be accessible all the time, emotionally or otherwise, you'll be manipulated, drained, and forgotten as soon as you're no longer useful. Why? Because being predictable makes you a tool. People press your buttons when they want attention, relief, or validation, then put you back on the shelf when they're done. You don't realize this because you're trapped in the illusion that being present for everyone will make someone be present for you. But it doesn't work that way. Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, loved, and recognized. It's this very mask that keeps you overly available. You say it's okay when you're suffocating, respond to messages immediately, even when exhausted, and justify yourself endlessly as if you owe something to the world. The truth is, the more you place yourself at the center of others' stages, the more you disappear from your own life. Availability is a subtle form of self-abandonment, a disguised way of seeking approval, avoiding rejection, and trying to control how others see you. But this comes at a cost: your peace, your vital energy, which is far more limited than you think. People who demand your constant availability don't actually want you, they want what you provide: validation, company, distraction, or emotional comfort. But when you change, set boundaries, and refuse to react, those same people get irritated and accuse you of being distant or weird. It's not because you've changed, it's because you've stopped being functional for them. Here's the cruelest truth: the more available you are, the less value others assign to you. What's overly abundant becomes expendable. No one respects what they don't have to earn, and no one values what's always there. So stop and think: who truly deserves your time, attention, and presence? Or better yet, who deserves your absence? Before answering that, we need to understand one essential thing: why do we react so much? Why do we give in so easily? What drives this almost automatic desire to respond, justify, and please? The answer lies in what Carl Jung called psychic energy. Your mind is an energy system, and every thought, emotion, and action consumes part of that energy. The question is, are you choosing where your energy goes, or are you letting the world decide for you? Every time you react impulsively, you waste psychic energy. Defending yourself against baseless criticism, engaging in useless debates, or trying to please those who don't value you drains your inner strength. Jung was clear: what you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself. People who live emotionally drained aren't weak, they're misdirected. And when you're vulnerable, you become easy prey for manipulative, opportunistic, and emotionally needy individuals. They sense that you don't guard your energy, react to everything, and try to solve the world's problems. A healthy psyche knows how to conserve energy within the system. This means saying no without guilt, remaining silent without feeling cowardly, and observing before acting. True power isn't in reacting, it's in choosing when and how to act. And this is only possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your own impulses. How many times have you lost sleep over unresolved conversations or spent hours ruminating on what you should have said? This is energy being drained without return. You're feeding dynamics that only exist because you insist on responding. Psychic energy is like a force field. When guarded well, it creates presence. You walk into a room and command respect without saying a word. But when poorly managed, you become invisible, reactive, fragile. The world has no mercy for those who give in easily. Start observing your triggers. What makes you react automatically? What causes you to lose your center? These are the points where your energy escapes, and that's where you need to work, not to become cold or indifferent, but to be selective and sovereign over yourself. One of Jung's greatest revelations is this: when you conserve your energy, you break the projections others place upon you. Opportunistic people don't need to raise their voices or force situations. They simply trigger the buttons you've left exposed and you react. Jung called this projection, the psychological mechanism through which people project onto others what they cannot see in themselves. But there's another side to this phenomenon. While others project onto you, you also become the receptacle for these images. The more emotionally available you are, the more you become a blank canvas for their projections. Think about that friend who only reaches out in crisis, that partner who always needs saving, or that person who praises you only as long as you're useful. None of this is by chance. They're not relating to you, they're relating to the idea of you, to the role you agree to play. Why do you agree? Because you're afraid of disappointing, of not being loved, of being abandoned. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen in shouting, it happens in the silence of guilt, when you feel you owe something to the other person, when you believe you need to help, understand, or be available, even if it destroys you inside. Here's the central point: the manipulator doesn't need to control you, they just need you to keep reacting. But when you stop reacting, the game breaks. When you start saying no, responding with silence, or withdrawing instead of explaining yourself, the projections begin to crumble. The mask they put on you falls, leaving people unsettled because they no longer know who you are. Worse, they're forced to confront their own emptiness. Your silence reveals the internal noise they don't want to hear, and then comes the attack, the criticism, the emotional drama. Not because you're wrong, but because you've stopped serving as a convenient mirror. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw and stop feeding the cycle, the other person's shadow emerges, and this is unbearable for those who've always used you as an escape. But what about you? Are you ready to deal with the discomfort of being misunderstood, rejected, or attacked for protecting yourself? Are you ready to endure the silence that follows the rupture? Because it's precisely in that silence that a new kind of power is born. The modern world is noisy. Everyone wants to be heard, respond quickly, win pointless debates, and prove their point, even if it costs them their peace. But there's a power few know and even fewer master, the power of silence. Not the silence of passivity or cowardice, but conscious, strategic, brutally lucid silence. This kind of silence isn't absence, it's amplified presence. Jung saw silence not as a void, but as fertile ground for inner transformation. When you stop reacting, you begin to observe. By observing, you see patterns that previously went unnoticed, emotional repetitions, manipulation games, cycles of self-sabotage. Silence allows for lucidity, and lucidity is dangerous for those who live to control. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond, when you don't explain yourself, when you simply disappear? It's not because they miss you, it's because your silence takes away their narrative control. When you speak, you're still in the game. But when you're silent, you change the rules, and that unbalances anyone who thrives on your reaction. True silence isn't the absence of voice, it's mastery over one's own energy. It's the refusal to be dragged down by someone else's emotions and the conscious choice not to engage in battles that aren't worth your wear. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires this distancing. Only in silence can you listen to yourself without the world's interference. Don't be fooled, though silence has a price. It will distance you from people who only valued you for the role you played, make you incomprehensible to those who saw you through their own projections, and label you as cold, distant, or arrogant. But all of this is a reaction from those who never wanted to deal with your depth, only your utility. Here's the hard truth. The more you mature, the more selective you become with your words, because you understand that each sentence is an energetic investment. Not everyone deserves access to your truth. Sometimes silence isn't retreat, it's sovereignty. It's the language of those who no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Silence forces the other person to deal with their own thoughts, their own internal noise, and this discomfort reveals more about them than any argument of yours could. You don't need to explain your absence, it explains itself. Those who feel threatened by it reveal how much they depended on your imbalance to maintain their own control. But the most powerful silence isn't the one that disturbs others. It's the silence that reconstructs you from within. The silence that connects you to something beyond external approval. In this internal space, free from others' demands, you begin to recover your vital energy and reconnect with your essence. This is what we'll explore next, relearning how to use your energy consciously, choosing where it goes, where it stays, and most importantly, where it should never be wasted. It's time to learn to be selective with your soul. If you're reclaiming your energy and setting boundaries, you'll find real value in tools that help you protect your energy and reconnect with your true self. Awareness without action is another form of self-deception. True transformation begins when you firmly decide to become selective, and this requires emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability isn't about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It's about no longer being accessible to anyone at any time for any reason. It's about taking control of your energy, your time, and your peace. This starts with small actions, not responding immediately, breathing before reacting, leaving discussions before being dragged into chaos, turning off your phone without guilt, saying, "Not today, I'm not interested," or "I won't get involved." The most important part, you don't need to justify your absence or explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. For many, this is unforgivable. When you refuse to explain yourself, you take away the other person's power to keep you within an emotional narrative where you're always the helpful, understanding, accessible one. Jung understood that every process of individuation involves isolation, but not depressive isolation. It's sacred isolation, a time of inner retreat where you relearn to listen to your own voice without the world's interference. You rebuild your identity not based on others' gaze, but from your own center. Want to know a good thermometer for your evolution? Observe who starts to distance themselves when you become more reserved, who tries to provoke you when you stop reacting, and who accuses you of changing when you finally start protecting yourself. These aren't signs that you're wrong, they're proof that you've begun to free yourself. Being unavailable is uncomfortable at first. You'll feel guilty, think you're being selfish, and hear that you're being too harsh. But this is part of the deconstruction process. You've spent your life being conditioned to put yourself second. It's natural that change causes discomfort not only in you, but in everyone who benefited from your old version. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the world, you're saying yes to yourself. When you withdraw from toxic environments, you affirm that your peace is worth more than any false connection. And when you stop explaining yourself, you begin to be respected, even if by few. Not everyone is ready for this kind of presence. Your emotional absence will expose wounds others don't want to face, revealing how much they depended on your chaos to feel in control. At this moment, the rupture comes, bringing pain, loneliness, estrangement, and the feeling that you're losing something. But in fact, you're freeing yourself. What happens after that? What comes after the distancing? What is born from the silence? When you stop being available to everyone, something profound begins to happen. First comes the silence, an uncomfortable silence that seems to scream inside you. You wonder if you did the right thing, if you're being too harsh, if you're losing people who liked you. But gradually, this silence transforms. It begins to cleanse, calm, and heal. Then comes solitude, not the solitude of absence, but the solitude of total presence, your own solitude. The solitude of the strong, of one who no longer betrays themselves to keep others close. In that space, clarity replaces confusion, peace replaces anxiety, and a new kind of strength replaces neediness, the strength of being whole within yourself. Jung said that the process of individuation requires you to distance yourself from the collective, disidentify from the mask, and walk alone for a while. That's exactly what you're doing when you decide to become unavailable. You're not fleeing the world, you're returning to yourself. At this point, you stop being a reactor and become a creator. You cease to be shaped by circumstances and begin to shape your reality from within. The people who feel uncomfortable with your absence reveal that they never wanted you, they wanted the role you played. Now that you no longer fit, they don't know what to do with you, and that's liberating. You will lose people, but you will find yourself. You will distance yourself from places, but you will reconnect with your essence. You will become misunderstood, but finally you will begin to be respected. Because when you're no longer available for anything, you become valuable, rare, unforgettable. Don't be fooled, this is a rebirth, a new beginning. The start of a life where you're no longer available for emotional crumbs, mind games, or voids disguised as affection. Now you only accept what resonates with your peace, your truth, your wholeness. If you've made it this far, it's because a part of you is already ready for this new path. A part of you has already understood that being loved means nothing if, for that, you have to abandon yourself. True self-love begins when you choose yourself, even if it costs you being alone for a while. So tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, or even hated in the name of your inner freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being you? If this message touched you, write in the comments, I choose my peace. Let's see how many here are ready for this transition. And don't forget, keep watching the next video. It's important much more than you imagine. See you there.